we're talking about Fritz Schnitzler. He was one of the largest men in Kansas, weighing as much as 358 pounds. Originally started out as a farmer, settled on a claim 8 miles southwest of Wichita on the Cowskin Creek. He got tired of farming and sold his equipment in early 1875. Then he started owning a restaurant, and then combined it into a bigger complex. And he called it, the Wichita Beacon called it Schnitzville. Notice the CH is not on there. It depended on what he wanted. If it was legal documents, he spelled it with CH. If it was not legal, it was SN. Here's a photo of Caroline, his wife Caroline and Fritz. They were married in Jersey County, Illinois on an unknown date. Caroline died on January 26, 1907 at the age of 76, 8 months before Fritz passes away. Here's an ad for Schnitzler's Restaurant from the 1878 city directory. And of course, the most famous of all the photos of Wichita from 1870 is this one of the 200 block of East Douglas. And the building on the left is the Keystone, the one to the way left is the Keystone clothing store. That was the forerunner of the bidding building. The first arrow is the M.M. Feckheimer clothing store. That was right on the corner of Broadway and Market in Douglas. Then you have Ed Knobloch's restaurant. He was the husband of the stepdaughter of Fritz Schnitzler. Then you have Schnitzler's Apollo Saloon. Schnitzler's actually standing to the left of, he's actually right here where the cursor is. Hopefully that shows up on the screen. He's right there where that red dot is. Hopefully that shows up. And then right beside Schnitzler's Saloon was Hoosie and Koner's cigar manufacturer inside the Douglas Avenue Bakery. Here's some artifacts of Schnitzler's. The top is a hand axe owned by Fritz Schnitzler around 1870. It's on display at the Wichita Central County Historical Museum. And on the bottom, on the right, is a beer glass from Schnitzler's Apollo Saloon in the collection of Cowtown. So that I get some collection pieces out here because now a lot. Unfortunately, the majority of the German stuff you see is Greifenstein's, and that's about it. Here is his gravestone from Schnitzler in Highland Cemetery. Now, the marker on the left, the angel did have a head, but it got vandalized and torn off many years ago. Plans are to make a copy of it and install it back on there. There's pictures of what it looked like before. Then we're talking about Mary Clint. She was born April 29th, 1839 in Germany. She married George Clint around 1866. Both came to Wichita around 1878, and they owned a dress shop. Or she owned a dress shop at 153 North Main. He also owned a cigar store right beside her dress shop. Had 4 children with 2 born in Wichita. George died October 2nd, 1892 at the age of 52. After Mary retired in 1902, her daughter Sophie ran the shop until her death in 1940. And then Mary died in 1904. Here is the exterior view of the Clint's Millinery shop at 153 North Main. The woman second from left may be Mary Clint's. There's nothing written on the back. And here's the thing with the 4 children: Frederica, George, Mamie, and Sophie from left to right. Got 1881 right here. And when the previous curators were going through some books, they found these 2 cards. One from the left of Mrs. Mary, advertising card for Mary Clint's millinery shop on the left. And on the right is an advertising card for Sophie Clint's millinery shop. So you have both the mother and daughter's millinery shops. And notice that Sophie moved the shop to 138 North Main Street. And here is the tombstone for George and Mary Clint in Maple Grove Cemetery here in Wichita. One of the major religions that the Germans in Wichita brought in was Catholicism. A little brief history of the Roman Catholics in Wichita. The Catholic Church in Wichita is an integral part of the history of the city. First Mass was held in Ellen Mahar's home in 1869. By 1870, there were 60 Catholics in Wichita. In 1872, the Catholics bought the first Presbyterian church building that's now at Old Cowtown Museum. And they moved it to the northeast corner of 2nd and St. Francis. And by 1888, there were 600 Catholic families in Wichita, which they then also had 3 churches that they were able to go to. St. Aloysius, which was at 2nd Street, southeast corner of 2nd Street in St. Francis. St. Anthony at 2nd Street in Ohio. And St. Joseph's at Burton and Millwood Streets in Delano. So they had 3 churches they could go to. First, we're going to talk about St. Anthony's. It's really the first German church in Wichita, originally called St. Boniface. Land secured at the northeast corner of Ohio and 2nd. Total cost was $4,000. Even though Wichita's German-speaking immigrants had diverse religious beliefs, the 2 biggest were Roman Catholic and Jewish. Others include Lutheran and Methodist. St. Boniface was dedicated in 1887. The land was originally a cornfield owned by William Buffalo Bill Mathewson. Before the move to the northeast corner of Ohio and 2nd, the German-speaking Catholics held Mass in the basement of the Pro Cathedral at St. Francis and 2nd. By 1902, the parish was rapidly outgrowing the 1888 building. So they built the second one, which they moved down to the southeast corner of 2nd in Ohio, and it was named after St. Anthony of Padua. Work began on June 13, 1902. The cornerstone was laid on December 7th, 1902. On September 17th and 18th, 1905, the new church was dedicated, and Mass was done in German until World War I. The Germans were getting a lot of backlash for being German, so they moved everything to English. It's now an English-speaking and Vietnamese-speaking church. Here is the interior of St. Anthony's Church, about 1920. The second church that kind of had some German influence was St. Joseph Catholic Church in Delano. It was done in 1887 to ease the burden on St. Aloysius. First church building built in the 1880s. It's the second oldest Catholic church in Wichita and the second German-speaking church in Wichita. Since St. Aloysius was located downtown, it was simply unable to provide for the needs of the hundreds of Catholic settlers pouring into Wichita in 1885 and 1886. Due to drought and the bust of the 1880s, the church was not dedicated until 1909. It sat vacant for about 18 years. In 1928, the church was stretched by having the sanctuary area of the church moved back 24 feet to the west. The new space supplied 144 new settings and increased the capacity of the church to 432. Here is the first church building. And an image of the construction on the left of the current one, about 1915, and then to the right is construction of them, showing them how they stretched the church. They basically moved the sanctuary part west and basically built seating in the middle. The second most promising German religion in Wichita was the Jewish. Jews have been present in Wichita since 1868. First set of Jews in the Wichita area were young single men with entrepreneurial aspirations who sought to buy the products of the land and broker them to the markets of the East. By the 1880s, Wichita's Jewish immigrants became merchants to those searching for riches. And controlling the largest share were 8 stores, all owned by Jewish immigrants. And here's a map of those eight ones. Range from queenswear to clothing to insurance to hotels. Probably the most famous one of all is M.M. Feckheimer. I've seen his first name being Max and Mayo, so I don't really know for certain. Feckheimer came to Wichita in 1869. He opened the Metropolitan Clothing Store in East Douglas in 1876. Then he decided to open a clothing store on the northeast corner of Douglas Market in 1879. In 1878, he ran a saloon at 107 West Douglas. And unfortunately, the last mention of him is in the 1892 Sage Directory. He is also one of the founders of Temple Emmanuel here in Wichita. His wife was one that was very, very unusual. She actually, him and his wife ran a beer garden, but the beer garden is actually in her name. This is an ad from the 1878 City Directory. And again, here is 1875 dram shop license for Gertrude Feckheimer. The second Jewish family was probably Lee Hayes. He came to Wichita in 1869. Beginning around 1864, he formed a buffalo hunting network with his brother David. By the mid-1870s, the Hayes brothers had become the largest purchaser for hides in Wichita. That was one of the major economies in Wichita was hide, dealing with hides. And then later they started a Southern Leather Company. Hayes died in 1922. And this is an image of Lee Hayes, his leather company. Lee is actually second from the left in the photo. After the end of widespread buffalo hunting on the plains, they adopted buying hides from their former Native American trading partners who had been exiled to Indian Territory, processing them and preparing them for market. This was all done on Douglas Avenue, very, very close to the river. So I'm sure the river was very good back then. Probably two of the other ones are Morris and Sol Cone. Came to Wichita in 1868. Unfortunately, I can't find any photos of the Jewish one other than the Lee Hayes photo. Established the New York store on the northeast corner of Douglas in Maine, 1870. They were also very influential in getting the railroad to come to Wichita. Sol opened the Wichita Savings Bank on the southeast corner of Maine and Douglas in 1872, while Morris concentrated mainly on operating the New York store. Sol was also mayor of Wichita in 1879 for 5 months. Sol left Wichita in 1879, Morris left in 1901, both for back to New York. Here's an image of the New York store. It was torn down in 1910 to make room for the current Schweider building. It was on the northeast corner of Douglas and Maine. And then from the museum's collection, here is a bank check from the Wichita Savings Bank, about 1870s. Along with establishing religion and businesses, the Germans in Wichita also established the Turbine Society. The Turbine Society originated in Germany in the early 19th century. Wichita's Turner Society was established in 1871. First hall was built that same year at Main and First. The society stressed German heritage along with physical fitness, conducted exercise classes, and sponsored dances and other community activities. This was also probably the first major theater in Wichita too. First hall cost $500. About 8 years later, they built the one on the southwest corner of First and Market. First building devoted entirely to theatrical productions. Closed as the Turbine Society grew. They needed a bigger building. The society introduced the building to the rest of Wichita by announcing a grand ball by stating their objectives: developing strength, encouraging truth, protecting justice, and guarding liberty. To support the promises of providing uplifting culture for the community, the Turbine Society sponsored a number of public concerts, dances and balls, and athletic displays. The building closed in 1888 and became a market house. Later on, it became home to the Anchor Trust Company. In 1918, it was raised to make room for the Lassen Hotel, which that building still stands. Here is an interior image of the Turner Opera House. You're looking from the stage. My guess is this image is from a 4th of July agricultural display. In 1880, an amendment to the Kansas Constitution was proposed. Amendment passed in 1881. Wichita supported the amendment while the rural areas of Citrus County voted against it. Therefore, the Germans in Wichita formed the German Immigration Society in 1871. This society's goal is to promote German immigration to Kansas and Wichita. It also had the goal of combating Prohibition, which came to Kansas in 1880. German-speaking immigrants feared the passage of Prohibition would hamper immigration to Wichita and Kansas, and they were partially right. Fortunately for German-speaking immigrants and other Kansans, Prohibition in Kansas lasted until 1948, 15 years after the repeal of national Prohibition. And here is the ad of them. All those are German-speaking ones. Peter Ghetto was a major pioneer. He had the Wichita Boating Company. Schnitzeler, of course. August, and then you had all the other Germans that were listed on that thing. And that is it. Are there any questions?
Well, I'm going to go ahead and unmute folks. If you have a question that you'd like to ask, you're free to turn your mic on and ask away. If not, that's fine. Let me go ahead and remind you that on the 14th, I will be doing a presentation about the Courier and Ives Company. Anyone have anything that they'd like to ask? You could also send it through the chat if you would rather.
Anthony, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So a lot of these pictures we were looking at had really nice brick buildings. Where were they getting the brick?
A lot of them were getting the brick from, especially in the early times, from southeast Kansas. Fort Scott had a big brick manufacturing area down there. Pittsburgh also had a big one. By the late 1870s, Wichita had its own brick companies. And then by the mid-1880s, they're actually getting them from Delano. Delano had a pretty big brick one, along with a big ice company, too. Wichita got a lot of its ice from Delano. So it seemed like a lot of the manufacturing went, once Wichita got it, it went west. And also, when you're looking at these pictures, you've got to realize also that, when you look at these pictures, especially the early days, the way they had it was, they'd have a building on each side of the street for a city block. You'd have one on the left, one on the right, and then in the middle, in the middle were wooden structures. So the way Hollywood has it and the way Cowtown has it is kind of wrong because it wasn't all wooden buildings in the whole block. That was something I learned when I did the streets talk, was that it was basically, once you got the bricks, because they got tired of fire. Fire was a big major problem and back in the early days of Wichita. So you would have, the less wood buildings you had, the better. And also increase your insurance costs too. Are there any more questions?
Okay, don't see any hands or any unmuted microphones. So thanks a lot for coming out this afternoon and listening to our presentation. I think